Hello everybody, it's Lucy Wolfe here, sleep consultant and author of The Baby Sleep Solution. I hope you're all really well today. I wanted to talk a little bit today about night weaning because I get a lot of messages about how and when you can stop nighttime feeding, and to be honest with you, every child is so different. Without a full review of your notes, I can never tell who needs what and when. Although I will say that it is highly likely beyond 9 months of age that the majority of children don't need nighttime feeding, and that if they do, they probably don't need a series of nighttime feeds. They would likely only need one. I normally suggest that if you're contemplating or feel that your child doesn't need nighttime feeding, that you discuss this first with your GP or your public health nurse, because they can review your child, they can review your feeding practice, and they can give you a very good idea of what your child might need, I would hope anyway. If you come to the conclusion that it is developmentally and biologically appropriate for your child to no longer need a nighttime feed, then I guess we would begin a night weaning exercise then on that basis. Lots of families try to night wean and they're not successful. And one of the main reasons behind this lack of success is to do with where the final feed at bedtime is placed. So I've spoken about this before, but just so that we're clear, if your final feed is really close to sleep time, so really close to sleep time for me is either the final feed, putting your baby, who ideally is over 6 months at this stage because we're talking about this, the final feed either puts them to sleep, or the final feed happens with about less than 45 minutes between drinking the feed, breast bottle, sippy cup, water, sports bottle, and then going to sleep, and fails to maintain their sleep without looking for more of the same. So if it's age appropriate, you have consent, you feel your child is getting enough to eat and drink by day. And very often children who are drinking milk in the overnight period, they don't get enough to eat and drink in the day because they're drinking in the overnight period. And then I call that a disproportionate feeding cycle. And very often we have to reverse that as part of the work that we're doing. So sometimes there's a little bit of a void where you're starting to pare back the nighttime feeds and the daytime feeds haven't caught up with you yet. That void is typically only about 3 to 4 days, if that at all. And I generally find that if it's the correct thing for you to do to night wean, then I generally find that eating and drinking by day improves exponentially once you begin phasing out those nighttime feeds. But the first point of contact when you're working on phasing out the nighttime feeds is actually to assess whether the feed at bedtime is too close. So too close for me is putting your baby to sleep on that final feed, or the final feed is it's happening 30, 40 minutes before sleep time and your baby is still looking for feeds in the overnight period. I would generally try to separate those two items out, because then that way we really know your child is able to put themselves to sleep at bedtime. And being able to put yourself to sleep at bedtime, having a sleepability there, actually unlocks the sleepability overnight. So very often if their feed is too close to sleep time and you try to take away the nighttime bottles, your child will actually just be so upset and just really won't be able to process that change. So again, the changes always start at bedtime. So whenever you can begin a night weaning process, first of all, you obviously would implement my feeding and sleeping balance as outlined in my book, The Baby Sleep Solution, because they're harnessing the biological rhythm and they will allow you to get to sleep on time. And then we would separate the final feed from bedtime. And if you're making that adjustment, you'll always use the stay and support approach to help your child through that transition. And again, it's exactly what it says on the tin. You stay, you support, you're very physically available, you're very emotionally available, and you help your child work through that. And then if you are phasing out nighttime feeding, I generally start with regulating the nighttime feed. So I might decide with you that your baby will be fed after 3 hours of the last feed, or 4 hours of the last feed, or 6 hours of the last feed, depending on your particular child. And then if they're having 1, 2 or 3 feeds through the night, you know, if we're doing 3 hour, 4 hour feeding, that 4 hour feeding would be 2 feeds during the night. We begin on that basis, and then over a few days, generally try to reduce the amount of time on the breast or the amount in the bottle, so that over the course of a couple of days you're reducing that down, your child's body is getting less used to the calories, you can re-establish your first morning feed and improve your feeding by day, and then you can start to look at doing no nighttime feeding when it feels right for you. And you replace the feed then with the stay and support approach. It always takes determination on your part when you are trying to work through that. Generally don't introduce water at this stage, because it would potentially become just a new approach. So rather than milk, it becomes water, and that's what the waking then continues. So again, once it is correct for you, then the best way to do it, I find, is to regulate and then to reduce. And of course, you can read more about this in my book, The Baby Sleep Solution. In terms of time-wise, once we have night weaned, I generally find within 7 days of the first night of no feed, we're really close to, if not already, sleeping through the night. So again, if you're 7-10 days beyond no nighttime feeding and the wakings are still really difficult, there's probably something that still needs adjusting and changing for your particular child. And again, you may need to discuss that with someone like me or your GP, so that you can see what other adjustments are needed to help you move into this better sleep space. I'm going to do a separate post on if your child still needs a nighttime feed and you're not looking to night wean, you're just looking to maybe reduce the amount of feeds that you're actually doing, or help them learn to sleep in between feeds. So I'll do that in a separate post because I think it's a completely separate topic. So I hope that is helpful to you. I'll post an article on this on my website, sleepmatters.ie, and I look forward to seeing you here again soon. All the best.